Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new interview-style show where I'm going to be talking with a new guest every month about all things RPGs. We're going to talk about a topic of their choosing and go through how it relates and can be used in your role-playing games. If you followed DMs After Dark in the past, this used to be a show called Modified Roles, but I've scaled it back for more intimate one-on-one conversations with the guest, and I'm now calling it Perspective Checks. For the very first episode on this feed, welcome, my home slice, one of the first people who ever DM'd a game for me, Troy Bliss. What is up, my dude?
What is going on? What a legendary intro, Rene. Thank you very much. Alt Ginger in the house.
Do you want me to not say your full name? Because I can edit that.
No, that's fine. They know me. They know me by my name.
This is true.
And my feet pics and everything else.
Blissbot, beep, boop, boop. Yeah, we're still waiting on that.
Spot, yeah.
We're still waiting on that shirtless calendar for the DMs After Dark fans out there, Troy.
It's coming. It's going to be a minute. The holidays have not been kind.
Yes, 'tis that time of year. When this drops, it'll be a little bit after, but we are recording this in the height of holiday mayhem. But we found a little bit of time, so that's what it's all about. And we want to talk about games. I have been kind of behind the scenes a lot here in the DMs After Dark world, so it's nice to talk to you, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it is. It is. I feel like we locked you in a basement. You haven't seen the sunlight in years.
Yeah, I'm just down here listening to audio and just going like, I got to get rid of every click, got rid of every breath.
Yeah. No, it is good to be able to record something again with you. Speaking of, I know we're going to be doing, well, I won't be there, but you'll be part of something here coming up next month too, so that'll be good.
Yeah, I'm hoping to start doing something new on the off weeks. We've been doing a lot of solo series or the 2-player series that Kent and Jess are doing right now, things like that, where we're exploring smaller group games. I kind of want to get back to the shorter form series, and I think we're going to try doing that in the audio only format, and I will be involved in those as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we are here to talk about your perspectives in gaming and RPGs, and you chose a topic that we're going to get into in a moment, but I want to set the stage for how I'm going to be running this series moving forward. I'm going to ask questions of every guest I have on, 3 questions to open the show, and 3 later on when we're about to finish, and I think that they cover a lot that will at least get us kind of in the mindset or get to know you a little bit before we talk about your topic.
Get the juices flowing.
Yeah, let's get those juices flowing. So, opening question, very easy one. Troy, how long have you been playing RPGs and how long have you been in this hobby?
Shit, well, I started playing RPGs when I was in elementary school. I actually remember I was writing a role-playing game book.
Nice.
When I was in like second grade.
That's amazing. Can we find that?
It did not go well.
No, I want to read it.
What's that?
I want to read it.
No, trust me, you don't. I remember one of the main characters in it got like ran over by a runaway cart, and that was like one of the big encounters.
You were ahead of your time, man. That sounds like Cabbage Guy from Avatar. You were just ahead of your time.
There you go. That's true. But yeah, how long I've been playing? Like I said, I've been playing since elementary school, so going on probably 20 years.
Damn, you old bastard.
Yeah. I know. I feel even older, honestly.
I can say that to you. I will never say that to a future guest that isn't like a member of the DMs. That's just some like nice person coming on. I'm like, you old fuck.
You decrepit piece of shit.
Which is funny because I'm like pretty older than you, so, you know.
Right.
But we're both victims of Christian's lich siphoning of our health, so.
Hell yeah, dude. He's taking the melanin out of your beard, and he's taking the vertebrae out of my spine.
Dude, I'm going full Santa Claus white. It's bad. All right, second question. What games have you been playing lately? Have you been playing any RPGs of note that you want to talk about?
It's a good question. So unfortunately, the only RPGs that I regularly play would be what we do for DMs After Dark, which for the past long while has been RuneQuest.
Yep.
6 Seasons of Sartar. And then I also have a home group that we do virtually for Shadows of Esterin.
Dude, the OG,
and I've been running that campaign now for going on almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in March.
Dude, that's the OG DMs After Dark podcast, though. That was our first stream ever.
Yes, it was.
So you're playing the first game we ever streamed and the most recent game we ever streamed at the same time. That's wild.
This is true. Yep, both ends of the spectrum there. It's funny you mentioned that too, because I recently went back and listened to it a little bit, and holy God, I was nervous.
Yeah, I think we all were. Yeah.
It's like in the audio editing and all that stuff, it wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, I've learned a little bit.
Big thanks to you, obviously.
I should probably, maybe I can go back one day and I'll see if I can touch those up a little bit, but.
I will say this, though, spoiler alert, there is an RPG that I do want to play and that I think we are going to play, possibly on the off weeks, audio only. Maybe we'll do it on the mainstream for DMs, but For the Dungeon is a really, really fun looking RPG. It's just shenanigans incarnate.
Well,
so
you saved me some work because that's actually one of the questions I'm going to ask at the end. So we'll get back to that and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
But in the meantime, the meat and potatoes of why we're here, the turkey and mashed potatoes, if you will, for the time of year that we're recording.
Oh, God.
What did you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so I wanted to discuss more or less, why are we this way? So tropes.
Oh, we're getting deep.
Yeah, tropes, what they are, where they come from, why we play them. Kind of a deep dive into it, right? I think tropes, everybody's familiar with them. If you've got a group at a gaming table and you've got your go-to bard, you've got your guy that's always just kicking doors in and crushing skulls, and so I wanted to look into, why is that a thing? So,
yeah. Tropes, there's a lot of value in tropes. They kind of get a bad rap. I feel like, you hear a lot of stuff sometimes of people being like, oh, it's fine, but it's like a little tropey. And like, yeah, that can absolutely happen, right? Like if they're just really bashing you over the head with like nothing about this is new, then that can feel kind of lame, But I think tropes, there's a ton of value to use tropes in your games, and subverting things, even those have become tropes of their own. But let's talk about it. You were talking about, you have your, let's go ahead and say like barbarian, right? Like kick in the door, just kind of your, you know what they're going to do. They're here to swing their big axe.
Right.
And then you have your sneaky rogues and things like that. Like tropes can feel like, you can play a trope as far as like your character's personality, but tropes themselves are kind of the whole crux of class design, right?
Right. They feed into it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like Powered by the Apocalypse playbooks are kind of just tropes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within a genre, because that entire framework of those games, Powered by the Apocalypse games, if you look at Masks, for example, you have the Transformed, you have the Janus, you have the Legacy, right? Like these are just like comic book tropes. They're just the characters you see over and over, and they just have different names based on who's putting out the comic, right?
Well, and the cool thing too about that, Rene, is that you as the player, you still get to play them. So they are, even no matter how tropey they are, they're unique to you. Nobody else in the whole world has ever played this character, no matter how heavy you lean into a trope, right? So I heard on a TED Talk once, it was talking about, I think it was about successful implementation in marketing and like new items and stuff.
Nice.
And the person said that kind of the sweet spot, the things that are most successful that just absolutely dominate in their respective markets, find a perfect balance between something that is novel and something that is familiar, right? Something that's totally new, but also something that resonates with a piece of you already. And the example he used was Pandora, right? Think about when Pandora first came into being. You took all the songs
Avatar?
that you like.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
I thought you meant like the James Cameron Avatar.
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
Nope, not that one. I meant
radio on the internet. Yeah.
I meant the music, right? So music is genres too, right? Just like RPGs, but you take the tropes, right? Somebody likes this type of music, this stereotypical, grunge person or punk person or whatever, and then you feed it into this algorithm, and it not only gives you the stuff that you like, that you've heard, but then it introduces you to new stuff that you have never heard, right? So tropes do have a tremendous value. They're the basis, I think, that we make decisions off of.
Yeah, and you brought up something that I love, where you said you could play something that's very familiar, but you're the only person playing this character, right? Like you might be, for example, we're going to get into like our types, me, Rene, and you, Troy, like the characters we kind of default to a lot. But even then, again, going back to something like Powered by the Apocalypse playbooks or, Forged in the Dark playbook designs, they kind of tell you the story that this character wants to tell, right? Like by picking a certain playbook, by picking a certain trope, like my wife always plays sneaky rogues, right?
Yes,
Like
she does.
the kind of character she wants to play, she does not want to get close to people. Like,
right.
I know she's not going to be
she's stealing shit.
Right. But at the same time, I mean, like it kind of goalposts what kind of stories you want to tell, what kind of things you want to do in the game. And like you said, you can be very tropey, but like if you, going back to old Modified Roles episodes, like how to be a good character, one of the first things we said was like build a character who cares about the story and engages with the world you're playing in.
Right.
So that's what makes these tropes interesting, right? Like you're not going to be able to play the character that you like from a TV show because you're not playing in that TV show's world.
Right. You're not playing in a vacuum.
Yeah, you're playing in your game group's shared story.
Right.
So you can play, we'll get into like the next thing here. We're like, I always play a nerd. You kind of tend to play wild cards, right? But I think we kind of play those for similar reasons. I love to play a nerdy type because I want to, in the time that I'm in this character's skin and playing through their, point of view, I want to feel out and like find out what makes the world that we're playing in work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want my character to be able to ask questions and my character have a reason to find or know the answers. And I think you, and maybe I'm projecting, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think you play wild cards because you want to test how much the world, is bendy. You know what I mean? Like you want to be like, how much can we make this work?
I think you're close with that, Rene. I think, and this is something that I thought of recently. I had a discussion with Christian about it actually, but I think the reason why I kind of tend to play the wild cards is it's not so much to see how bendy the world is, but it's to see how the world accommodates both the mundane and the strange, right? Like, for me personally, especially, we play a lot of new RPGs all the time, and some of them are pretty rules light and others are very, very rules heavy. And I'll be honest, I mean, don't tell anybody, internet, but sometimes when it's a really, really rules heavy game, I really lean into the power of the mundane, right? Because it doesn't matter what the fuck the rules are in the system that you're playing. You can always you can perform like the standard operations of a human being, right? Or your character. So emphasis on the little stuff, right? Like
Istanbul.
I think about Time Reese, right? Or Istanbul, right? Like, Istanbul's whole, character concept was, well, he was deaf. He couldn't hear, right? So it was about how he perceived the world in a different way because of that. And then it was also about isolation, loss, right? Those are big overarching things. They're feelings, they're emotions, they're sensory things that exist in every single world, no matter what the rule system looks like. So I can focus on that and really create a good character and a good story and not get too delved in and bogged down by the rules and stuff, I
was going to say with Istanbul and kind of Kaim Reese too, you make this character who conceptually, like on the surface, players in that world will look at them and be like, what is this jelly-legged Minotaur-looking guy? Or like, what is this weird little kid? You know what I mean? This clearly weird shaman. But then you made their problems in the world. You made their plot points, like what they cared about, simple.
Right.
In a not simple world.
Right.
And it was like, how does the complexity of the world, you let the complexity of the game handle that heavy lifting of the crunchiness of the system, for example, while finding a more powerful story in
the simple things. Yeah.
Yeah. In the simple things.
Yeah. I wanted to, there's so much I want to talk about on that stuff, but I wanted to get back to something you said really quick, which was you said the reason why you tend to play nerdy, kind of nerdy archetypes, nerdy tropes, is because you want to explore what goes on in the game, what the game system looks like, how the world is built together. Right? Correct? Does that sound, am I summarizing it pretty well?
Yeah, I appreciate good world building, and I love feeling out how consistent it works, or finding the ways that the fantastical is, like you said, kind of applied in the simple ways, right? Like, how does this change an otherwise normal day? right?
So,
Like, I don't think enough people in a game like Dungeons and Dragons think about the fact that cantrips would absolutely break every economy. They would break every, you know what I mean? Like,
so true.
Like, access to just infinite silly little magics, no matter how silly and little they are, is like shattering. So, you know, so like I like to play those games and be like, okay, like what's everyday life like? You know what I mean? Like, but also like, what are the big questions of this different place?
So I want to go one step further with that then, and we're going to metagame for a sec. And I'm interested in looking at the why Rene as a human being tends towards that. Because that's a real thing. I think at the heart of it, I think there's a reason, like a psychological reason why we play tropes, right? Some people, I mean, shit. All right. We're going to just go into this real quick here. I know other Blissbot has said that for her, you know, RPGs are very cathartic. They're like a cathartic release of emotion. And this is emotion for her as a human being in real life, right? So that's no small thing. That's a really big thing. That's powerful, right? So that's kind of the power of RPGs. So if you are dealing with something where you're trying to process something and then you're going to try to do that in an RPG, there are, of course, going to be correlations to like the things that you're feeling, the things that you want to address, and the underlying emotions that you as a person have, and then how you act in your character in the RPG, right? I mean, Amber plays these angry fucking rage, you know, kill all of the patriarchy characters, and then also plays like weird wolf boys. Now, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but she is my sister. Is there a correlation there? I don't know.
We, for those of you who are not familiar, we have DMs After Dark business cards, and on the back of Amber's business card, we put the Amber character scale, which on one side is terrified man, and on the other side is terrifying woman, but the whole thing just says wolf.
Yeah, right. This is true.
Like she has a type, right? She definitely plays into one of those two things on the spectrum of, and you know what's funny? You know that old, I don't know the origin of this phrase, but like there are two wolves inside you. Right. You know what I mean?
Yep. The one that lives is the one that you feed. Yep.
Exactly. Amber just has one wolf, but it gets fed by two. It gets fed by either a terrified man or a terrifying woman.
Yes, that's true. So, so Rene, why do you think you tend towards that as a person?
That's a great question.
And I'm asking you this deep philosophical question on a podcast where we're improvising. So good luck.
Yeah. No, I don't shy away from talking all the time. Like when I've been doing my solo series and stuff like that, obviously, like you said, our own personal worldview plays a lot into how we play games, right? Mm-hmm. I read a ton of fantasy and sci-fi. I try and switch it up and read other things, but my day job is I'm an environmental scientist. I'm a wetland biologist. I am somebody who studies the actual, you know, ecosystems of our planet, at least my local region. I love knowing how all these systems work together and why certain habitat is used by certain animals and what if I needed to, like, where could I get fresh water and like, what can I eat out there? And like, you know what I mean? Like little things like that, like everything out there in our world has evolved for billions of years to basically make it so everything can sustain itself. I won't get into how depressing it is that we've pretty much destroyed that, but I think that I play these nerdy characters in these other worlds because I want to know what turns and like, you know, what systems make the world go round. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally fair. That's a good introspection there, Rene. I think.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It was funny in my Miru playthrough on the DMs After Dark feed. You have to roll like every day for what terrain you end up in. And I was in the swamp so much and I just kept going, well, fuck, back to work.
I can't escape. Perfect.
I just, you know, even in this game, here I am in the swamps. Oh,
I love it. Speaking of that, do you think...
Yeah, your turn. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I will definitely get into the why behind me here in a sec. But, you know, do you think, you're a wetlands biologist, right? Mm-hmm. Do you want to do what you do in real life in an RPG, or do you want to do the farthest away possible thing from that?
Another just kind of time capsule for if someone listens to this in 5 years or whatever. I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
And I made a druid. Like I always play a druid. When I played with you for the first time,
right.
I
Mog.
played a druid because I was like, yeah. And I named my Baldur's Gate 3 character Mog.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love playing the nature-focused kind of builds. I definitely think that I like leaning into that because, again, I just have an interest in like, how much work did this designer
really
put into thinking about how their world works?
Right.
Little peek behind the curtain, I've definitely tried coming up with like writing my own games that take into consideration natural environment and how to interact with it in a way that's more than just, you roll on a table and it says like murky bog,
right.
I get like viscerally angry when like RPG book will be like, you find yourself in the swamps and it's all like reeds and like it's boggy. And I was like, you just mentioned like 3 different wetland types. You know what I mean? Like swamps are not marshes, are not bogs. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so like, but again, I don't expect people to know that and care about it enough when they do that for their game. But
right.
I've thought about, can I make a game that makes this interesting? And I think the game that Christian and I are pretty close to releasing is going to hopefully make people think about their natural surroundings a little more. Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that when it finally comes out in, beta or whatever.
I'm super close. The quick start is pretty much done. I just need to make it look nicer. I don't want to just put out like a boring text PDF.
Do you think you'll kickstart it?
I don't know. It depends. I think the plan is put out a quick start, get the word out about it, see if people check it out, test it out, let us know what works, what doesn't, in addition to our own testing. But yeah, I mean, like if it seems like people are enjoying it, I'd love to get it. I'd love to get it, printed.
Kickstart.
Yeah, like do a physical run of it. But again, it all depends on how people seem to enjoy it. We'll see.
Right.
So, Troy, why do you think you play on the surface wildcard characters, in their hearts simple characters? Is that is that your trope?
I would say yes. At least that's pretty darn close. I would first start by saying that the trope of character I've played has changed throughout my career as an RPG player.
Well, because you've changed as a person.
Right. Well, exactly. And part of that's because I started playing when I was, 8. So I wanted to be the hero, the defender, the protector, right? All of those things appealed to me. Because, shit, dude, if you ask a classroom full of like 8-year-olds, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're all going to say fucking astronauts, doctors, and like policeman, right?
We should push those kids
and
to
then
stick to it.
If you ask everybody that same question 10 years later, literally almost none of them say policeman. So, so there's possible reasons for that. But,
yeah, ask a bunch of high school seniors, what do you want to be? Like 20% will have an idea that they might actually pursue, and the rest of them are like, shit, man, I don't know.
Right. So I think for me, now the trope is that kind of wild card with an emphasis on the core parts that connect all of us, because it doesn't matter if you're, a rogue or a shaman or a barbarian or whatever, you have all of those same feelings, right? And emotions. You experience all of those things on the same spectrum, at least, maybe some more than others. But so when you really focus on investing effort into that, it not only helps you build a better, more fleshed out character, but it makes it so much easier to connect them to the other characters in the game.
Yes.
And part of that is my own trend into, mental health counseling and these things that I'm pursuing in real life. They do bleed into RPGs a bit, and for me, I have come to find in my life that it's really the small things that are like beautiful and powerful and miraculous, like having a conversation with a stranger, watching hummingbirds chase each other around my fucking flower garden. Like, this is the stuff that brings my life meaning.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy, right? The laughter of my child. Like,
dude.
So why would that shit not be important in an RPG?
Yeah. And I think that more RPGs need to take time to explore, like, if possible, and this is just DM advice for anybody listening to this, at least I like doing this. Every once in a while, just like, everyone likes to say zoom out, right? And like, hand wave certain things and like just get to the next part. Also, every once in a while, just have like a vignette.
Right. The opposite.
Yeah, have like a moment that does not matter to the story and just be like, what beautiful thing does your character see? Or like just take the time to enjoy in this otherwise probably pretty brutal story we're telling.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because at the end of the day, if you're playing an RPG with probably very limited exceptions, there is a grand goal or, epic event in mind.
There's going to be a confrontation, right?
Right. So I would say I think that's probably why I tend towards that. I think for the most part is my character tropes. But not everybody's like that too, right? Some people play to escape that kind of thing. Some people are like, I don't want to be bogged down with all the minute details and stuff like that. I want to do the epic shit. I want to do the action. I want to be that fucking barbarian that's smashing doors in and cracking skulls. You know what I mean? Like, and that's okay too.
My brother, actually both brothers-in-law of mine, for different reasons. One of them works with younger people all day, every day. And when we get to play games, he's like, I just want to hit things.
Yeah, dude, that makes total sense.
I get it. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, I don't want to have any more heart-to-hearts. I'm done. And the other one is dealing with like, and this actually goes back to your, you like just taking those moments to like watch a couple hummingbirds, man. Like, and hey, this is a couple older guys at this point coming along. Anybody listening to this going, oh, fucking bird watchers. It happens to everyone and you will enjoy it in a few years. But anyway.
Well, think about what I do for a living too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the opposite end of that. It's like, dude, every fucking day that I'm working is not little things. It's really big things that happen very, very quickly. Not all the time, obviously. I'm not trying to make my job out to be some glorified fucking...
No, but I mean, there are
a lot of lulls in the action, but
there are scary moments for a lot of people,
For sure, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I don't want to do that shit when I'm playing an RPG. I want to slow things down. I want to focus on the minutia because for me, it's important.
Yeah. You know what's funny is before we started recording this, you and I were just talking, like catching up on life and stuff like that. And I was talking about how the last thing I want to do at my job is interact with the public. And you're like, one of those things that just makes my day is just having a conversation with a stranger. And I'm like, that's like the last fucking thing I ever want to do. But it's funny because we're talking about our characters and you make these characters who first thing that you think about when you make these characters is their threads and their connections to the other players or someone else in the world. You're going to make that connection that matters, right? Like that's the string you're going to be plucking to make this character sing, right? For me, I'm making a character who is tied to something about the world, right? He has a question about what is going on here. How does this work? And like, that's what it is. And I love making characters who have connections with the other players, mostly about like, hey, what shared answer can we find in exploring something about the world? You know what I mean? Like, so it's funny. Yeah. Like they're almost like built back, like, opposite, but they do the same thing. In the middle, there will be that knot. Yeah.
I swear people are going to think we're sponsored by TED Talk because I keep referencing that. But
they're good.
I do enjoy it. I like listening to them, man. Some
always
of them are good.
Be learning, dude.
So
yeah.
But there was a TED Talk, and again, it was a clinical psychologist that was talking and speaking about people, right? And he mentioned this theme called your idiosyncratic self. And this is something that really, really resonated with me. And it's completely applicable to role-playing game characters, just like it is to real people. But in some ways, you are like every other person. In some ways, you are like some other people. And then in some ways, you are like no other person.
Love it.
Right? That's fucking beautiful, man. That is the thing that ties all of us together. It's what creates a balance between unity and uniqueness, right? Like,
dude, that's actually a really great set of questions or prompts to do in like a session 0 character creation, right? Like,
yeah, how are you like everyone else? How are you like some other people? How are you like no one else?
How are you like a big chunk of the population of this world, right? Like what, like, is it nationality? Are you part of an organization? Are you part of whatever? How are you like some people? And that could be like the party, right? Like what shared thing do you have? And then like, how are you just you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's like your own character arc or something about you individually.
Yeah, absolutely. So
you just made me think of something else. You were talking about how you watch TED Talks and how they give you ideas about how to approach, maybe not directly, but you listen to these things and they help you realize something about yourself. And then you apply that to RPGs, either the characters you make or how you think about, even when you're listening to other members of our crew play, or if you're watching someone else or listening to something or reading a book, you're thinking about how those relationships are reflected in what you've learned. You know what's funny is I went down a rabbit hole a few years ago, and I always think about this to myself. If you go to like tvtropes.com, there are very stereotypical and tropey kind of, when you bring a group of people together that are going to be the subjects of your story, there are things like, depending on the number of people, you get things like the 3-man band, right? You have the leader, the lancer, and like, you know, the heart or whatever. And there's the 4 temperaments, right? There's like choleric, sanguine, melancholy, and phlegmatic, right? But those represent different types of personalities. And if you have those 4 personalities represented in a group of players, then they play really well off one another, right? And then you have the 5-man band, which is the protagonist, the lancer, the heart, the big guy, and the brains, right? And you can do that that's Avatar, The Last Airbender, right? Aang is the hero, Zuko is the lancer, Sokka is the smart guy, Toph is the big guy, and Katara is the heart, right? And what's really great, and another thing, here's just a DM tip for anybody doing this, if you have a party of players, I know one of the biggest rules ever, and players will push back against this, is never split the party. But one of the coolest things you can do is when you have your group of players, right? Write them down, write down a list of your 4 PCs or your 5 PCs, and then write down every combination of characters you can make out of that party. And then try and make sure every PC has a one-on-one scene with every other PC. Because how they interact with each other will be different based on the personalities that they have chosen for these characters to embody.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. That's a great bit of advice, Rene. And, you know, it can, depending on how big your party is and how long your campaign is, that can be a whole entire campaign goal, right? I mean, if you're running with 7 players or 6 players, it's like, shit, it might take you a long time before you have that opportunity to really have that wholesome one-on-one interaction with everybody. But no, I agree with that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up about tropes that is powerful is not just the existence of the trope being powerful, but the divergence from that trope.
Yeah.
That creates such incredible moments when you have the character who is the bruiser, who is the fucking smash, crush, kill, destroy, and then they're challenged at a core level with that, right? Like that is who they are. But then something shocks them. You know, maybe it's a child, or maybe they witness something that they can't beat with their fists, right? That creates incredibly powerful role-playing moments. And the cool thing is, if the trope itself didn't exist, that divergence from the trope wouldn't have that same shock value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm big on that. I love that. It just throws the players for a loop. It throws, you know, the GM for a loop sometimes, even. It even throws the story for a loop sometimes, right? The GM throws something at you that's really important, and he's like, all right, he's going to respond this way. And then you throw him a fucking curveball and go the total opposite direction, and everybody goes, holy shit.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? You can definitely, that's good advice too, right? You know, if your character, if you're GMing, or even if you're a player, if you're playing into a trope, or you're playing a character that has clearly set their goals, and people are picking up on, okay, this is how this character is always going to be acting, this is what they want to do when their scenes come up, this is what their character arc looks like. As a GM, you should give them opportunities to explore that. Let them play to their strengths quite a bit, right? Let them do the things that they want to do, but then also challenge them on the things that they're clearly a bit weaker on, or what their blind spots are. And I will say, and this is a game I'm actually surprised I haven't run on DMs After Dark, but maybe we can do that in an off week soon. And plenty of people will say this is one of the best Powered by the Apocalypse games. but Masks: A New Generation is a teenage superhero RPG. So you are telling a lot of, the game is more about being a teenager and going through, you know, the relationships you have with other people, the relationship you have to authority and adults,
right,
while also balancing the increased responsibility that you're going to have and the powers that you're learning to control. So it's a lot more about the interpersonal connections than it is about being a badass superhero. If you want to do that, go play Mutants and Masterminds, right? But what I love about the playbook design of Masks is things like you have the playbook, The Bull. You know what that character wants to do. They want to beat the shit out of things. But my favorite thing about the Bull is they don't ask you, like, what do you want to destroy? Like, they do, but the more important thing is the Bull is always in love with somebody. They have a soft side. It's like an integral part of this character.
Right.
You can't ignore that part of that character, right? You have two relationships. One of them is your love. You've opened up to them about the worst part of you, and then one of them is your rival. You know what I mean? Like, they tried to control you, or like you need to beat them up. You know what I mean? Like, you want to best them. Same with like the transformed. It's like, who transformed you? Do you forgive them, or do you want revenge? Right? Like, that itself is a character arc. You're just kind of saying, this is the story I want to tell. And even though it's a trope, and even though a lot of transformed are going to have similar arcs, like we said at the very beginning, only you are going to play your specific transformed story.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, definitely throw them the curveball, right? Like, don't let them solve a problem the only way they've been doing it. Right. Make them break.
Give them the opportunity to go outside of that, right? You know, let them break those things if they can. It depends on the players you're playing with, obviously, but we haven't talked too much. We've talked a little bit about tropes, but we haven't talked too much on like tropes in the form of genres and stories.
Yeah.
And I know you opened with that a little bit, and you said, think of Curse of Strahd, right? In the Dungeons and Dragons 5e world. You've got the Romani. There's strong connections to the Romani people. You know, there's definitely some undertones there of like racism. Some of it was arguably done not well. Some of it was done okay. So I don't think there's anything wrong in saying, okay, this is a trope that is antiquated in the sense that it didn't age well, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with recognizing a trope for that, if that's the case. Like, okay, we're not going to play this trope because it's like the racist trope, right? And that's just not something we want to.
There's a history associated with the trope that has really come to light and become something that we can do better about.
Yeah, right. Which the thing is, at the time, right, maybe didn't exist. Or maybe it did exist, but we just weren't aware of it, right? So, those parts of tropes, I think, I don't want to say they're no good, but those are the parts for sure that can be like, these are the dangers of tropes. But
yeah, I actually, back when we were still doing modified roles with the DMs, we had a list of topics that we were debating, doing series on or doing an episode on, and one of them was world building. And a lot of when you're coming up with ideas for an original homebrew world, or even if you're playing within an existing setting like the Forgotten Realms, that's got a lot of history to it. And even within that, there might be some problematic, tropey kind of factions, organizations, peoples, cultures, whatever. And you might want to change it. And like we were just saying, sometimes you're going to everybody wants to make that cool nomadic peoples. Maybe do a little bit of research about how it really went down in the real world cultures that would be inspiration for that kind of society or culture, and make sure that you're not just one for oneing it. So it's just a direct, obvious comparison.
Give them complexity, right?
Yeah. And like I've been saying for how my characters like interacting with worlds, make them more interesting within how your world works. Give them something that they interact with that makes them like no other group. Your uniqueness to ubiquitous, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Look how this is all tying together. You can take every little thing we've talked about and find a way to make a trope unique and special to you in this. And that doesn't just go
Right.
for characters, that goes for cultures in a homebrew world.
Yeah, I think overall, there's a reason why we tend towards tropes. I mean, there's certainly more to role-playing than tropes, but they're a big part of it, and there's a reason for that. And it's because they work. They help the machine go around. They serve as a point for the players to identify with.
Yeah, there's a basis for a type of experience that the player wants to explore, and there are tropes that will help them experience that in a safe way and in a way that they kind of have some narrative control over.
Yeah, absolutely. What else you got for me, Rene?
We started to touch on tropes as genre too, right? Because a lot of what people are going to be listening to this and their headcanon for when we're talking RPGs, there's a lot of fantasy RPGs out there.
Right.
There's a lot of sci-fi RPGs out there, and the sci-fi RPGs are going to do a lot of the same tropes as well, right? Like you have your humans who've colonized space, you have your effectively space elves, you have your effectively space orcs, right?
Right.
And yeah, you could do better, but also there's a lot of value in those, right? If we're talking about other cultures, other societies from other planets, other galaxies, there are so many interesting things you can come up with and be like, this is just how they live. Yeah. And you could do noir, right? Like detectives and 1950s. Hey there, kid. You want to play that? That's great. Don't put the sexism and racism in there, obviously, right? There are things about tropes to, like we said earlier, you can do better. But you can definitely lean into the rainy alleyways and corrupt cops and, you know what I mean? The femme fatale. Or, you know what? Flip that one and just make a real gigolo.
A good old temple.
Yeah, shout out to Christian's Blades in the Dark character.
Yeah, no, I think the other thing, and it just goes back to what we said earlier, is you got your space orcs, right? You got your space elves, whatever. The key is the thing that's going to make that work, that's going to make it interesting, is finding the perfect balance between something that is new and something that is familiar, right? And that's what these things do. I mean, they reskin stuff so that you can recognize it, but so that it's also different and unique.
All the time.
Right?
All the time.
And it works. It works in marketing. It works in products and stuff like that. It appeals to us as people. So if you want to make a role-playing game that's appealing or has appealing aspects, you're going to do that to a certain extent. And I have to give a shout out to horror genre.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
My blind spot. So definitely give the horror heads out there some
even thinking about the horror genre, it's like, just like how a character that's playing a trope, that juxtaposition to that standard approach is extremely powerful. The same thing is true of a genre, right? You can't just have the next scariest thing over and over and over and over again, right? If you do, that's not actually horror because your players aren't invested in anything. They don't think they have any hope. There's no chance. What is the purpose, right? So when you sprinkle in those little bits of hope or those little bits of, love or connection or reprieve, the quiet moments, right? Like those things are what make horror so much more powerful. It's just like the characters. So.
Well said, my dude. Yeah, horror is going to be a big old blind spot for me.
Yeah, Rainey, that's not your forte. Nope. I would love to run a horror game with you, though. I feel like you running a horror game might be exceptional. I don't know. I'm not sure what that would look like.
Yeah, that would be funny.
It would be funny. Yeah. Yep, it'd be a funny horror game.
I'm still too scared to play in an Amber game, so
That's true. It's true. It comes to light. You heard it here first.
Yeah, and by the time this goes out, I will have not been in her other newest campaign, so.
No. We'll convince you, Rainey.
I will be in one eventually. All right, Troy, I got some questions for you.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. So, thank you so much for talking about these tropes, for talking about the value that tropes bring because they're not just shallow, reflections of things we've heard over and over. There's definitely unique and personal value that people can get out of tropes in games. So, do you have any last bits of wisdom, advice, or homework for anybody listening to this as far as tropes go?
I do have a last bit of advice, and it's based off of what you just said. You can make tropes all of those bad things. So don't do that as a player. Don't be overbearing or cheap with your tropes. Don't just completely lean into them at the expense of the story and of the other characters in the game. One of the things I fucking hate the most in a game is when a player will say, "Oh, well, it's what my character would do." Ugh. Right? Okay, there are times when that is appropriate, right? There are also times when that is basically a way for somebody to just excuse an extremely shitty, metagamey, selfish thing that they want to do at the expense of the story rather than in support of the story. So don't be that douchebag.
If your excuse is that's what my character would do, don't make a character who would do that.
Right. No shit. Or how about your character is challenging the way that they think about things in this particular moment?
Choose this moment to be better.
Yeah, no shit. So that's my advice, Rene.
All right. Question number 2, penultimate question. Do you have any games you're excited to play or ideas that you're excited to use in a game?
Well, I did already mention the For the Dungeon that I'm excited to play. Might be something we're doing on off weeks, might be something we're doing on our main weeks. I'm not 100% sure. But my idea is, as a real quick, just kind of teaser is what the game is. You're playing a bunch of, I
want to be a minion.
Bad guys, henchmen.
I want to be a minion.
Minions. Yep, you're playing a bunch of minions for the big bad evil guy, right? So I am reincorporating a big bad evil guy from a game that we played previously before we started streaming.
Oh, I love it.
And this is going to be the big bad evil guy that we are all working for. So I'm stoked for that.
Oh, yes. And last question is there anything you want to pitch, and where can we find you on the internet, Troy?
Hopefully not in the seediest places of the dark web, but...
I found you for sale, Troy.
How much?
Not enough.
Not enough. Damn it. It's never enough. I guess things coming up. We are wrapping up another year with DMs After Dark, Rene included in that. As he mentioned, big piece of everything that happens and is produced behind the scenes is Rene. So I'm excited for this next year. I'm excited to get additional content rolling. I'm excited to be a little bit, to a certain extent, going back to our roots and showcasing more games and doing more short form stuff. Because for me personally, that's something that as a player, I really prefer, you know, and that's just my personal opinion, but I'm excited for that. Gosh, let's see. I guess I'll pitch something else that is pretty new that I'm excited for. Studio Agate, which is the studio that produces Shadows of Esteren and Fate Forge. They are coming out with a new role-playing game called Tainted Grail. And it is based off of the game, which is a very, very popular game. And my understanding of it is it's basically a Shadows of Esteren incorporated in a Arthurian like world. So like King Arthur and his knights and Merlin and all that stuff. So I'm pretty stoked for that. I think they're going to be maybe putting it on Kickstarter here pretty soon. They're in development stages, so I don't know how long it's going to be. It'll probably have some big stuff coming out with it next year. The studio is really working on it pretty hard right now. So
Cool.
That's about it, Rene. That's all I got for you.
Well, it's never enough, Troy.
It's never enough.
No, I'm just going to thank you so much, dude, for coming and talking to me and nerding out on RPGs just like, you know, the old days.
Just like the old days, dude.
I'm bringing it back.
When times were simpler. Awesome. Thanks, Rene.
Once again, thank you so much to Troy for being my first guest on this first Perspective Checks episode. You can check him out on our stream or on our podcast with DMs After Dark. And hopefully he'll be joining me again here on this podcast feed for a game or something similar in the near future. If you'd like to be on a Perspective Checks episode or suggest something to cover, email me at rainyplaysgamespod@gmail.com.